Lidia Thorpe, thanks so much for your time. What are your reflections 1 year on from the Voice referendum?
Well, we haven't progressed in this nation when it comes to relationships with First Peoples, and it was a referendum we should never have had. It was a waste of time, it was a waste of money, and it's actually created more harm than good for this nation.
Is that the feedback you get from Indigenous communities across the country, that it would have been better off to have not tried?
Look, the people that I work with, the Black Sovereign Movement, who made up of mainly activists and grassroots communities, yeah, it was, why did we have to go through that exercise? We are hurting for the reasons, yes, there was a no vote, but also people didn't understand what they were voting for. They were being forced into agreeing to something that they didn't understand, and I certainly hear that across the country. I think the way it played out was bullish. Communities were told one way, and that was it. And if we talk about free, prior and informed consent, people must know what they're making a decision on, right? The information needs to be free. It needs to be prior to making that decision so that you have the time to understand it. Now, communities didn't have time to understand it, both black and white communities. And I think that's why it failed, but also they were told not to do this by many activists, including myself. They wouldn't entertain a conversation or a meeting to look at a way forward. They went ahead with it anyway, and got the result that we got because they wouldn't listen.
Do you think the failure lied in the messaging in terms of not getting the detail out there, or was it more in the actual fundamental of the idea being put forward?
I think it was all of the above. I was part of those dialogues around the country. I attended the Melbourne dialogue and I attended the Blacktown dialogue in Sydney, and it was set up in a way where if you were not a delegate, if you weren't accepted or invited, then you didn't have a say. I chose not to be a delegate at Blacktown, and we were told to sit somewhere else. Aboriginal people were told to sit somewhere else because we weren't picked to be part of the process. And that went all the way to the meeting at Yalara. The meeting wasn't even in Uluru. The meeting was at Yalara, and it was controlled by the corporations, and they knew what the outcome would be. They knew the numbers before they got to Yalara. They knew that they had the mandate by who they picked to attend. And those that couldn't get there because it's a long way to go, costs a lot of money, they were shut out of the conversation. And I believe that they had that dialogue or that big meeting at Yalara because no one could get there except for those that they picked.
You used to hear from the Yes campaign that this carried, 80% support or so in remote Indigenous communities. Do you think that was a misreading of the mood on the ground?
That was out of 300 people. The 80% was out of 300 people. So that's not true that 80% of all of our people agreed. And, my family didn't agree. My grandmother and my mother did not agree. So we're certainly not part of the 80%.
You're a strong advocate on treaty. I suppose many Australians probably don't have an idea of what that is, and crucially, what would that mean for Indigenous Australians?
Well, treaty is a peacemaking instrument. It's when there's been conflict between two parties and they come together and they sit down and they negotiate a way forward. That's what a treaty is. And if we had a treaty in this country, it would benefit everybody. It wouldn't just benefit First People. I would say it would get rid of native title, and it would have genuine outcomes between non-Aboriginal people and Aboriginal people right across this country. You know, I'm keen to talk to farmers about protection of land because that's what we have in common. So treaty is about peace, it's about moving forward together, it's about finding common ground and ultimately coming to a place where we can celebrate this country together.
Do you think the vote no in the referendum on the voice has pushed back any progress you could have had on a treaty?
I do think so, but at the same time it's an opportunity to talk more about treaty so that there is a better understanding. Treaty does not mean that we're going to take your backyard. We're not going to take anything that you worked hard to have today. We want to work as a nation together to ensure that our land and our water and our resources are available for future generations, for all of your generations, not just ours, all of our generations. And I think the more people understand what treaty can do for you, then more people will get on board with the idea of a treaty. If we look at treaties around the world, you know, no one lost their home, no one lost their job. They were enriched by culture and knowledge of the land that they live on. And so you can only benefit.
Do you think, though, that some people, there's been an effective scare campaign that was kind of conflated with the voice, that people do fear that it will mean they lose out, for better, for worse? Is that a problem you have to try and work against?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, treaties being something that I've worked towards all my life, and my family have always called for treaty. Victoria right now wouldn't have treaty if it wasn't for my family. We challenged the government to take on treaty because we didn't agree with constitutional recognition. So treaty should be happening at the grassroots level with local communities, local governments and local traditional owner groups, where we can sit down and have proper yarns instead of listening to the scare campaigns that do happen about losing your backyard or being in fear of a land grab from Aboriginal people. It's not going to happen. What land is available, we want to preserve for our future, for the future of this nation. So treaty is not a dirty word. Treaty is something that, if we embraced it as a nation, we could really mature as a nation and move towards a day where we could celebrate together. We know that every January 26th, it's not a nice day anymore because of the division that creates. So why don't we just work towards what we do have in common, work towards what are the priorities for local communities? Is clean drinking water a priority for children, for families? I think it might be, because it's our priority as well. And having land with trees to create fresh air and oxygen, that's important for everybody's children and future generations. So if we look at it from that level, then I think we can have an incredible treaty, a treaty of the 21st century, and a treaty is a blank canvas. So politicians will always, come up with their scaremongering ways and strategies to divide this nation. Treaty is for the people, by the people, and the sooner we get on with a treaty, the better off we're going to be individually, everybody in this country, but also as a nation. We can say that we're a united nation that care about each other.
Can I turn to the politics? You left the Greens in the lead up to the Voice referendum being held. I wonder, in hindsight, do you think you would have left if we hadn't gone through the Voice referendum?
Absolutely.
And why?
The Greens have a toxic culture. That's well documented. I didn't feel safe in the Greens, and the referendum was the straw that, what do they say, broke the camel's back or something, and that was my out. But leading up to the referendum and even before the mention of a referendum, there were problems, and it feels incredible to be an independent, where I'm not towing party lines, obviously, and where I'm free to speak on the issues that I believe in and that I'm passionate about.
And if we turn to how the Albanese government's handled the post-voice policy space, how would you say they've handled the last 12 months? That they lost on the voice, and now we seem to be in this period without push forward on the other two planks of the Uluru Statement from the Heart?
Well, they've buried their heads in the sand. Where are they? Where are they on a way forward? They're providing no leadership, and they were told not to have that referendum. They had it, they lost, and now they don't want to do anything. So it's disappointing to see those that advocated so strongly and spent millions and millions of dollars on a referendum we should never have had, to see them now burying their heads in the sand is just deeply disappointing.
Do you see Linda Burney's departure from Parliament and from that prominent role as a minister? Is that a fresh start for you in terms of dealing with this government, or have things been the same under Malarndirri McCarthy?
So far it's same. And yeah, I'm not sure Labor know what to do next. I think Labor are still shell-shocked by the loss, and they seem to continually get things wrong when it comes to First Nations in this country.
Malarndirri McCarthy said publicly that she would like to reach out across the aisle in a bipartisan way to fix issues of Indigenous disadvantage. Has she reached out to you?
With only a few hours' notice, so I'd like a little bit more notice to attend an 8 a.m. meeting.
Do you think it's not genuine in terms of that approach? Do they not see that they need your support? How do you feel about it?
I think since the referendum, they haven't engaged with me much at all. During the referendum, the Prime Minister was calling me into his office regularly to try and get me to vote yes and to come out with a yes position. But since then, no one from the government has really, particularly on First Nations, been forthcoming and sought my advice. I mean, there are a few exceptions on that. I do have some good relationships with some ministers, but in the area that I need them, yeah, it's not so much forthcoming.
Yeah, as you said, the Prime Minister was asking you to say you'd support the Yes campaign. Do you think if you had advocated for Yes, you could have made a big difference?
Maybe, maybe not. I think it was just so badly run, and they were just like around the country. The Yes campaign were going about their business so badly that it just left a bad taste in people's mouth. So their execution of their campaign, I think, is what caused them most harm. And I wasn't about to jump on a sinking ship that I knew was going to sink before it even began. And now we're reeling in that in the reality of that result.
Perfect. Lidia Thorpe, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.